Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today I would like to present to you my case for the Minnesota Vikings to terminate Mike Zimmer as the head coach of the football team effective immediately. This is part one of a three-part series where we are going to look at how we can clean house and begin preparations for 2021 after a disastrous loss to the 0-5 Atlanta Falcons on Sunday for Week 6. So without further ado, if you're new here, welcome. Gained a lot of support yesterday for yesterday's Burn It All Down video, so I hope you continue to stick with the program as we continue to follow this Greek tragedy that is the Vikings 2020 season. So, I have turned on Zimmer, as have many in Vikings Nation. We now want change. We want things to be different. It's been 7 years that we've put up with this merry-go-round of mediocrity, and we are in a position right now where we could definitely land a franchise quarterback in the NFL draft, which we'll get to that in a minute. And I think it's time to rip off the Band-Aid and have the conversations that are difficult, but we have to do it. So let's take a look at the Vikings season so far. We currently stand at 1-5. We have all of the games here on the board. We lost to the Packers 43-34. We lost to the Colts 28-11, Titans 31-30. Texans is our only win of the season, 31-23. Seahawks 27-26, and the Falcons' most recent 40-23 loss. So beginning with the Packers, it was clear in the first half that this team was not prepared. It wasn't until garbage time did things start to look better. So the final score and statistics don't indicate exactly what happened. As I've said before in previous videos, stats lie to you sometimes, and this is a good example. The Colts game is another game that we were completely unprepared for. Mike Zimmer does not have this roster in any sort of mindset where they are ready to go play football on Sunday, with the exception of 3. So the Colts' first half was an unmitigated disaster, and then in the second half it didn't look any better. This is one of those ones where it was a stinker from start to finish. The Titans game was much better. They came to play. Justin Jefferson had a breakout game. They finally decided to put him as the starting wide receiver over BC Johnson. So credit where credit is due. You finally made the right call. It only took you 3 damn weeks. But the Titans game ends in disaster because the defense is, of course, porous, and with the bend but don't break mentality, the Titans managed to kick 3 field goals on their way to win. And there are some questionable head coaching decisions in this game. Number one, going for it for 2 points too early in the game when it's unnecessary. And then there was another one that I'm forgetting right now. But either way, it was all capped off by the final drive of what I would call futility by the Vikings, where they ended up with 3rd and a mile and unable to do anything else despite only needing a field goal to win the game. We move on to the Texans game, where they finally play like they should. They go into halftime looking like a decent football team, and they're able to close it out with a goal line stand with the defense. I will note that we are 1 dropped Will Fuller touchdown away from this team being 0-6. So keep that in mind. Next, we go to the Seahawks, where it's a primetime game. We don't win in Seattle. We don't win on primetime. And for the longest time, it looked like, hey, we've really got a shot at this. They came to play. And then it all unraveled in the third quarter in a span of 2 minutes when we gifted the Seahawks 3 touchdowns, and they go on to win the game in dramatic fashion because Mike Zimmer decides to leave points on the field once again. Despite, a pretty decent successful 4th down conversion rate this year. I think they're at 50% as of this recording. And we leave the points on the field. There's this huge debate afterwards about the mentality of playing for overtime, but I'm still in the camp that you take the points and then you hope for the best. Not either way Russell Wilson's getting the ball back. It doesn't matter. You take the points that you can. And there's some huge debate about that, but, we've been over it. Then we come to the Falcons game for Week 6. This was supposed to be the part of the schedule that starts to get easier for us. And then the Falcons come into our stadium at 0-5 with an interim head coach, and they blow us out. The final score, 40-23, is also, again, not a good indicator of what happened because, of course, Kirk Cousins, being the best garbage time quarterback that there is in the world, lights up the stat sheet when the game is already over and nothing matters. So, after all that, we stand at 1-5. We're 0-3 at home. We currently own the number 2 pick in the NFL draft by reverse order of standings. And that's according to NFL.com. That's not me. That's not a Vegas website. I understand, most Vegas websites are have different draft orders because they don't assume that how things sit today is going to end. I think Vegas has us somewhere picking between 10 and 14. But if the season ended today, we have the number 2 pick. Hello, Justin Fields. To go a little bit more in depth, the problem is with Mike Zimmer's team not being prepared, we are consistently chasing points and entering the fourth quarter trying to catch up, which is not where you want to be. It's correlation of his defense this year being extremely poor, and the offense creating enough turnovers in the first half of games to dig themselves into a hole. The Packers, we entered the third quarter down 29-10. Against the Colts, we entered the third quarter down 17-3. Against the Titans, we entered the third quarter down 25-24. The Texans is the only game where we entered the fourth quarter, with a lead, where we were 24-16 up on Houston. Against Seattle, we entered the third quarter down 21-19. Against the Falcons, we entered the fourth quarter down 30-7. Game was over. So, it's been an effort in futility for both this offense and this defense. Going into this season, the defense was supposed to be retooled, but good enough under the guidance of Mike Zimmer to be serviceable, and the offense was supposed to keep us in games. Neither one of those two things have happened. The defense, Mr. I've never had a bad defense since I've been here. Congratulations, you do now. 28th in yards allowed. 32nd in points allowed. That's dead last. We have allowed the most points in the NFL at 192. We have also allowed an average of 32 points per game. With an offense that is led by a quarterback who sucks and leads the league in interceptions with 10, you are not going to win football games. So, as I've said previously, this season is doomed. I don't think we win more than 3 or 4. I will be surprised if it hits 5. Next, we move over to my 2020 Misery Index, which is the main focal points that I would like to present to the jury in order to greatly enhance my case that Mike Zimmer is no longer the man for the job, and we should clean house immediately heading into the bye week. Number 1, as we've mentioned going through the schedule, that he was not prepared for 3 games this season. 3 out of 6 games where they show up in the first quarter and completely flatline. This causes them to be in a hole where they can't escape and ultimately lose the game. The Packers and the Colts were given the excuse that, oh, it's early in the season. It's going to take some time for them to figure this out. There was no off-season programs, what have you. COVID, no preseason, just a whole new world. So everybody gave them a pass for the first 2 weeks, but boy, did it look bad. Then you have a couple games where it looks like everything is figured out, back to normal. Things just aren't going their way, so they get more of a pass. The Falcons game is the catalyst because you show up against an 0-5 team that looks like it's headed for rock bottom, and you give them life. An interim head coach, his first win of the season in his first game in your stadium. And that, to me, leads to me to believe that there is no excuses left. This team has given up, and I think Mike Zimmer has probably lost the locker room in more ways than one. Number 2, leaving points on the field. There's still a debate about the field goal at the end of the Seahawks game, whether or not they should have taken it. It's a pretty 50-50 split. Analytics was a wash. It was 98% win chance going forward, 97.2% win chance kicking the field goal. So it's just a matter of opinion on that. But it's this person's opinion that going for 2 points too early twice in this season already, and only being 6 for 8 on field goals attempted, where the opposition in games that we've played is 19 for 19. I don't know what the league average is, but teams that we have played against us are 19 for 19 on field goals. So there's 19 field goal attempts in these 6 games by other teams, and there's only 8 for us. I don't understand what Dan Bailey has done to this man, but it's clear that he is not interested in kicking field goals. I understand analytics tells you to go for it all the time, but still at the same time, we need to start taking points because we put ourselves in position to lose the Titans game and the Seahawks game by leaving points on the field. Number 3, going for 2 too early. I've kind of already touched on this. There's been a couple instances where we've done this, and it's just one of those weird head coaching decisions where you look back and you wonder why. His answer has always been that he's going to make the decisions that give him the best chance to win the game. That was his excuse when he went for it on 4th and 1 against Seattle, because he knows if he gets it, the game is over. He doesn't have to do anything else. And again, that's a matter of opinion, but it is one that I raise to you, the audience. Number 4, negative 37 point differential. It's not the worst in the NFL right now, but it's bottom tier. I think it's bottom 5, bottom 6. It is the worst point differential he has had for his defense in 7 years, the first year being the worst one. So this once again clamors to the I've never had a bad defense since I've been here bullcrap. Congratulations, now you do. Number 5, Danielle Hunter's tweak. Can we get him to stop lying about injuries, please? Because in the leading up to the season, he wasn't practicing, and he told reporters, oh, it's just a tweak, he'll be fine. Then he goes on 3-week IR, and everybody's like, oh, okay, yeah, he'll be back by week 4. Guess who still hasn't returned and is now going across the country in New York to seek second opinion about his injury? That's Danielle Hunter. And this kind of alludes to the Yannick Ngakoue trade, right? Because they knew how bad it was. That is the only reason the Yannick Ngakoue trade happened. They were going to be just happy going into the season with Danielle Hunter and whoever else they could plug in on the other side of the defensive line at the edge position. The only reason Yannick Ngakoue is in Minnesota is because they knew how bad Danielle Hunter's injury was, and they just didn't care to tell anybody. So, to me, that is just poor handling of the situation. Next, one of the things that irritates me the most about the Mike Zimmer regime currently is the nepotism. Your defensive coordinator position is filled by 2 people. You have co-defensive coordinators, your longtime football friend Patterson and your son Adam Zimmer. Yet you're still the one that calls the defensive plays. Why? That is insanely weird. It boggles my mind, and it just proves that it's not working because your defense is dead last in a lot of statistics. So the fact that you just have those 2 guys there for who knows what reason why, I'm sure that they do positional work. I'm sure they're not there just collecting a paycheck. But at the same time, you don't have the right minds on your staff, offense or defense, to make this work. So you've made poor staffing choices in accordance to in-game decisions and game planning. So that's 3 strikes in 3 huge areas where a head coach has responsibility for making sure that those things are running like clockwork. Number 7, the players who have escaped. This is an interesting one because you can look around the league at Minnesota Vikings players who are now on different teams and suddenly don't suck. Xavier Rhodes is a great example. The Indianapolis Colts have sort of taken him on as a reclamation project, and I am guilty myself of heading into the season thinking that Xavier Rhodes was going to be trash in that defense, and it turns out that he's not bad. He's playing pretty good. Stephon Diggs saw the writing on the wall last year. I don't know at what point he did, but he knew that this wasn't going to be anywhere where he could excel, or this team was, trending in the wrong direction. So he demands a trade. He gets it. He is now on a team that is looking like it is headed for the playoffs, and he has left behind a team that is now headed for the bottom of the NFC North basement. So whatever he knew, whatever he saw, he was correct. And then the next one that's interesting is Mike Remmers, because this speaks more to being able to get the most out of your players when you can, because Mike Remmers is currently playing guard for the Kansas City Chiefs. I repeat, Mike Remmers is playing guard for the Kansas City Chiefs right now, and it's not going bad. Is it, the best situation for the Chiefs? No, absolutely not. But we were led to believe after last year that Mike Remmers was the worst guard in the NFL. Now, this season, after 6 games, we have learned that it doesn't matter who we play at right guard, because none of them are good. Pat Elflein wasn't good. He gave up 5 pressures before going on IR. Drew Samia gave up 5 pressures in his first game. Ezra Cleveland yesterday gave up 5 pressures at the right guard position in his game. Now, there will be the excuses that Ezra Cleveland is playing out of position and on a side of the ball that he's not used to. But at the same time, that's on coaching. You didn't get him prepared to play that position. You just threw a body in there and hoped for the best. So it's interesting to see what other, and the Xavier Rhodes thing is another point to that, is that the reason that they had so much turnover on this defense, I believe, is because it wasn't a money or a contract issue. It was because they didn't want to be there. Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander and Xavier Rhodes, you lose that many players in a position where Mike Zimmer is supposed to be the whisperer. I mean, there's something, fishy going on here behind the scenes that we might not actually be privy to. And they may have just used, the salary cap as cover, because as I said in the Burn It Down video yesterday, the salary cap is a myth. All these other teams seem to be able to figure it out. And they give these huge contracts to players. They still come in under the cap, and they remain competitive. So I don't want to hear the salary cap excuse anymore. And then lastly, with the retooled defense, which he is responsible for having made this mistake where they can rebuild this defense on the fly and still be competitive. Throwing at Vikings cornerbacks this year has resulted in some pretty nice quarterback play for the opposing offenses. Throwing at Vikings quarterbacks this year has yielded a passer rating of 126.8 and a 71% completion percentage. That is miserable for this defense and is the number one reason why we are not going to win games, because in the modern era of the NFL, this is a passing league, and when you can't get pressure on the quarterback, which we've been able to do to a degree. Yannick is averaging 1 sack a game. I don't think he had one against the Falcons. I'd have to recheck the stat sheet on that. But Cam Dantzler, for as much as I love him, and I think he's going to be a great player for us, he looks completely lost when the ball is in the air on these 4th and 10 and 3rd and 12 passes. Mike Hughes suffered another injury against the Falcons. He's probably going to be out for an extended period of time. He might even be calling it a career at this point. Jeff Gladney doesn't look ready to play this season. And the rest of the corners and secondary are just struggling. It's a struggle bus on this defense that was supposed to be in good hands and is currently not. So, closing arguments. Number 1, 2020 is a disaster. Mike Zimmer is 58-43-1 since 2014. That's 7 years as the Vikings head coach. In those 7 years, we have gotten 2 playoff wins, 3 playoff losses, and 2 of those 3 playoff losses were complete embarrassments. We had the 2017 NFC Championship game against the Eagles, where we went to Philadelphia and got punched in the mouth. And then we had the 2019 divisional, or was it the divisional round? I forget. We had the 2019 game against the 49ers, where we go to San Francisco and we get punched in the mouth. That's 2 playoff exits out of 3, where, again, the theme of the day is that his team is not prepared. And they look completely lost in those losses. They're just completely and total embarrassments. And I have suffered enough through those, and I think you have as well, that we don't need to tolerate that anymore, and he should be canned. The only playoff loss on his record that really is just, kind of not his fault is the Blair Walsh game in Seattle. That's just one of those ones that happen. It happened to the Bears. It's happened to everybody. It is what it is. We are 19-18-1 since 2018. This is the Kirk Cousins era. It's only been 3 years, but we are trending to where we are going to have a negative win-loss with Kirk Cousins as our quarterback, and Mike Zimmer is on the record as having been said, quote, "If I get the quarterback position wrong, I'm probably fired." I think I paraphrased that, but you get the idea. I've already been over the players who do better once they leave: Mike Remmers, Xavier Rhodes, and Stephon Diggs. And number 4, this team quit against Atlanta. It absolutely quit. There was 10:45 to go in the 4th quarter. They were down 23 points, and they punted. Now, I understand that you don't want them to run up the score, but they did anyway. It shows some fire. Kirk Cousins goes off to the sideline, and he watches the game. Half the time, he's just watching lackadaisically. Sometimes he's looking at his iPad. He's not talking to his teammates. He's not talking to his receivers. Adam Thielen is on the other end of the sideline just stewing while this is all going on. And yeah, it just doesn't look like anybody cares. They fell behind. They realized it was a bad hole that they couldn't get out of because they have a quarterback who is inept, and this team is 1-5. So they're like, peace out. We'll see you in a couple weeks. It's the bye week. We don't care if you're still here by the time we get back to get ready for Lambeau Field and the Green Bay Packers. Number 5 reason to fire Mike Zimmer, and I think is the most important one, is that we need to rip off the Band-Aid and we need to address this situation right now. Because you want to go into the next offseason with as much time as you can to prepare, to get things ready to attract the next candidate to be here. Now, I'm going to do a video where I go over who I think that should be. But as I said prior, that there are already teams who are, realize that this season is lost, and they are evaluating their rosters, they're evaluating their coaching staffs, and they are making preparations to go into 2021 to right the ship, and we need to be right along with them. Any time that we currently spend thinking that Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman and Kirk Cousins are going to take us to the promised land is time wasted. We need to get a head start ahead of other teams to figure out where we stand, what assets are expendable, what core players we want to keep taking forward, and begin to make the pitches to candidates, GM and head coach, on how this team is the greatest landing spot in terms of head coaching vacancies coming into 2021. Because you can make a pretty decent pitch to the Falcons for their head coaching spot because of the talent they have On offense, they just need to rebuild the defense. That's about it. The Vikings need to rebuild pretty much the entire team. They have some great young core pieces, and that will be a great pitch. You know, you've got Eric Kendricks, you've got Danielle Hunter, you've got Justin Jefferson, you've got Dalvin Cook. There's a lot of great pieces here. Just come in, put your stamp on the program, figure the rest out. So that is it. That is my case for firing Mike Zimmer as of this moment and not waiting a second longer. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.